Welcome to the GSMC Pets Podcast, the show that caters to pet lovers of all kinds. We'll talk about pets on social media, pets doing amazing things, and how to take care of the pets in your life. Whether your pet is a dog, a cat, a llama, hamster, reptile, or something more exotic, you'll find educational and entertaining information on the GSMC Pets Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Pets Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Samantha Melvin, and I gotta say that I'm super excited about today's topic because, well, I need a little help. So, I already have 3 pets, an 11-month-old pit mix, a 13-year-old toy poodle, and an ageless, beautiful, magnificent Manx cat. And my husband. But I don't think he really will be quite as docile a pet when I tell him that I really, really, really want a raccoon. So help me, please. I would really appreciate it. So let me run these things by you so that we can have a good idea of the facts when I finally make that decision. So today, what I think we'll be covering is why it would be a good idea to have a pet raccoon, why it might be a horrible idea, and if I still can't decide, I could always think of the raccoon cafes and just them as wild animals. And if I am still stuck, I could always ask the question, what would Bob Ross do? And then to close, I would just talk about our rescue Cookie, the marvelous little toy poodle. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because, well, we just had a vet appointment today, and it was her first vet appointment at the place that we really like. But let's get back to why raccoons would be a good pet and why that's a good idea for me. So, who wouldn't want to have these creatures with adorable little hands and cute little bandit masks? And for everyone who remembers a certain animated movie with a raccoon as a sidekick to the beautiful heroine, they are clever and goofy and super helpful. Well, then again, he was an animated raccoon, so who could really believe that representation? Even though that would be really awesome. So let's start off with how raccoons are pretty freaking smart. They're problem solvers. I've heard that they have figured out how to unlock crates that their owners put them in, and I've also heard about them opening up jars. But you know what really helps? Their adorable little hands. So dexterous. Sure, they walk around on all fours, but that's one of the things that makes them so wonderful. And sure, humans can do that, but it's definitely not as cute. Speaking of cute, have you seen baby raccoons or just even young raccoons? I hear people say that they're quite friendly at that age and playful, and they run around like dogs and cats. Ooh, maybe they can start learning fetch at that age and probably even work to clean my house for me. Because, you know, paw hands. Actually, who wouldn't want to train these lovelies to do all kinds of tricks? They're smart enough, right? Back to their little hands, apparently raccoons have a ton of touch receptors in their little digits, meaning that their world is dominated by feeling things with their hands. They apparently don't even have to look directly at the object. Hey, if they like what they feel, they'll play with it. And they'll play with it for a good while, but if they don't like it, they just kind of leave it. This actually reminds me of a YouTube video where a raccoon had a handful of cotton candy, and they attempted to dip it into a lake. And we know what happens to cotton candy when it's put in water, and it disappears. And so this raccoon has this cotton candy, dips it into the lake, and it disappears before its very cute little eyes. and just the devastation. I would say watch the video, but don't recreate it, because making Raccoon sad really makes me upset and will make other people very upset, I imagine. So, on a related note, this is going to be related to their touch receptors. They actually do not wash any of their food for the sake of cleaning it. They actually use the water to help them perceive the item in their hands. Kind of think of it like dipping your hand in a bunch of slime and you're touching like maybe a ball or something, and you start to kind of get a good picture of what it feels like, because you're differentiating between the slime that's clinging to you and also this ball that is in your hand. And I think that kind of makes it a little easier for you to kind of get something into perspective. Anyway, that's a cool fact about raccoons, and it makes me want them even more. So, what can I say to convince my husband that one would be a great addition to our family, other than the fact that one of our very own U.S. presidents had a pet raccoon that he named Rebecca, and this raccoon, Rebecca, was actually supposed to be his Thanksgiving dinner, but he refused to eat her. And I just think that's a really cool little fact about a president. But don't tell him that it's Calvin Coolidge, because my husband would immediately say no to that. Now, you might say that there's no point in having a pet that is nocturnal, and I would generally agree with you. However, according to this raccoon influencer named Mitchell, you can actually condition raccoons to stay awake during the day, which means more raccoon fun. You know, the walking like a dog, them playing with the small objects, cuddling. But this is only if you adopt one at a very early age. This next thing is a little controversial, and I'll preface it with this. I have a very soft spot for anyone who is potentially misunderstood. For instance, my husband is tall and very broad. He's just a big guy. People think he's intimidating, and that there's a possibility that he might be an aggressive person and mean and more willing to fight. At least that's his concern. That's what he voiced to me, but I don't really see it. But I've known him for about 13 years. And then another example, our cat Eisen, the Manx. He was born without a tail, and so many people assume that he's been in an accident that just completely removed his tail, and they make jokes about that. But the reality is that he has something called a riser right at the very place where there's supposed to be a tail, and what that is a little piece of vertebrae that occasionally, rises and falls depending on his mood, depending on what he wants, that kind of stuff. And let's keep on giving more examples, just so you get a good picture of what I'm getting at here. There is Cookie, and I've mentioned Cookie, and we're going to be talking about her later, but she is a 13-year-old toy poodle, and she is poorly socialized. She is, when we first got her, she was pretty mangy looking, and she just is scared of everything. And people assume that she's kind of a really not nice dog. Not nice. There are other words that I can use, I know. But she's actually a real sweetie, and it just takes a lot of time for you to get to know her. And, she just wants a good life. And that's what we're trying to do for her. Now, this next one, and this is a very obvious one, and you guys are very familiar with this. We have Regina, and she is a pit mix, and we haven't had this issue come up yet, but there has been a lot of prejudice against pit bulls. And for me, I'm afraid that any chance that someone gets to point out, hey, that's a pit bull, and she's acting like a pit bull, and you should keep her away from other animals and children, that's something that I fear for this little puppy. She's only 11 months old, so it's it's something that really runs through my mind a lot, and I just love her even more for it. I definitely say that they are the most common carriers of the disease, but again, not all of them have it. So it's just kind of something that people struggle with, honestly. And I would also say that even if they all had rabies, they all would probably be dead. And you know what? They're not. What I can say, I have a really soft spot for anyone or anything that is misunderstood. Some of the best people that I know are misunderstood. You just gotta give them a chance. This should apply to most things, no? There are so many things that you can miss out just because you don't want to give them the time of day, honestly. Anyway, I could probably have my husband watch Mitchell's videos as a way to convince him of a possible raccoon pet. Mitchell seems to be having a lot of fun, and he seems to have a very successful venture with his own raccoon, Tito. I would say, though, that we definitely would not be able to take this little raccoon buddy of ours on adventures like ziplining. With all this in mind, it sounds like a great idea, but we have to think about the other side of the argument. Why would it be horrible to have a raccoon as a pet?
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Deal. We are going to push my agenda of adopting a raccoon using my thoughts in the last segment, and then we're going to whisper this part because my husband will use any and all excuse to prevent me from adopting a raccoon because I know for a fact that he thinks it's a terrible idea. Nah, I'm just kidding. I won't whisper. I want you all to hear me. Probably a big turnoff for me is that raccoons are not easily house-trained. When they are, it's fine. They can go outside or in a litter box, but one of the great things about raccoons, their independent thinking, is a hindrance, actually. If you upset them, they'll throw it right back at you and use the bathroom all around your house. Fantastic, right? You know, it's kind of like a cat when they're displeased about their litter box being neglected. You may think that they're house-trained, but one false step and you got a mess on your hands. I'll concede that this is not ideal. Not only does it suck, it kind of puts me up against Eisen versus, the random raccoon that we've taken in. And Eisen will never, ever, ever share his litter box. That's just a reality. And if the raccoon does try, there's going to be some fisticuffs. And if there are fisticuffs, then my husband is going to be siding with Eisen. End of story. So, speaking of fisticuffs, raccoons like to bite. They bite your family, your friends, and your other pets. They just bite. And not in the way that the kids used to say a long time ago when I was a kid, biting as in, oh man, that sucks, that bites. No, not like that. They just physically bite. But, I can definitely say that we don't need Regina to be playing rougher because a raccoon comes in and starts playing rough with her. We don't need Cookie shrieking whenever this raccoon, just comes to approach her. That would be horrible. And we definitely don't want Eisen to be displeased because you know what? He is the king of the house. He decides who goes and who stays, basically. But the more concerning of the reasons is this. It's hard to find veterinarians that are willing to treat a raccoon or even see a raccoon, even if it is a pet. Here are some things to consider. Your pet will always find some need for a veterinarian to take care of them. They can get sick, they can get injured, they could just need their vaccines, but either way, you're going to be seeing the vet at least once a year. And that's a very difficult thing with raccoons. You just have a very small pool of people that will be willing to take care of them. And then we go back to the stigma of raccoons having rabies, all of them having rabies. And we know that's not true, but if you are letting your raccoon go out and experiencing the world as they should, then not getting them a rabies vaccine or they're not able to get one, well, that's basically challenging the world that, this little guy is going to be perfectly fine. And we really shouldn't be challenging anything in that case. Anyway, the longer it takes for you to find a medical professional for your pet raccoon, the higher the chance of them getting a preventable disease that could potentially harm them or, again, go back to that stigma. And this also means more expenses and more guilt and burden of a sick animal, just kind of weighing on you. Now, just to be honest, for a period of time, my husband and I were young and we had Eisen. He was so cute and so young at that time, and he always worried us about his breathing. He was regularly wheezing as if he had asthma, and we couldn't afford to take him to the vet because we were just poor college students. And it was so hard to hear him wheeze day in and day out, night after night. And, you get guilty because you want to help your little guy. And now financially we're doing great and we're able to take care of him and take him to the vet regularly. But, if he were a raccoon, chances are we would have a difficult time finding someone to even take care of his respiratory problems. And it wouldn't be because of finances. It would be because vets don't typically like to take care of raccoons. This next thing is connected to finding a good vet. Sure, raccoons are very sweet, but once they become sexually active, then they become a little more aggressive. The only thing that can stop this is for them to get neutered. And now tell me, how in the world are you supposed to find a vet in a very small pool of individuals who will take raccoons as a patient? And if we can't find a vet to vaccinate or do a general checkup, do you really think they're going to neuter them? I mean, there's a possibility because maybe the vets might want to try to control the population of raccoons in the area, but that is the only reason that seems appropriate for something deemed a wild animal. And if you like to travel, you'll have a difficult time finding a kennel that will board your little buddy. Again, this probably has got to do with the stigma against raccoons and rabies. And also, raccoons are troublemakers. It requires a special type of person to be able to take care of them, and most people at kennels aren't trained to take care of raccoons. We like to travel, and we already have such a hard time with our current pets. I don't think that helps my case at all, actually. But, this is all the reasons why it would be why it would be a bad idea. And we wouldn't be able to go to our friends because, well, that means that they're going to be even less prepared to handle the potential chaos and destruction that a raccoon might release upon their homes. It would be quite unfair, actually, to ask a friend to babysit for a raccoon. Now, maybe you are a part of raccoon owner community. That would be great. They might be able to help you out, but I haven't heard of one of those, and that there seems to be a community for everything, so I mean, that's always a possibility, I guess. Probably the biggest thing I'm seeing in this is the cost of owning a raccoon. We'd probably have a very difficult time finding a raccoon sitter, dog sitter, cat sitter combo. Paying someone to do this would be quite hefty, and you still wouldn't know if they really knew what they were doing. Finding a vet would also be a freaking nightmare, and I've seen that the vets that do take raccoons charge a lot for their care. Then, raccoon-proofing your home, because even though they're so cute, you know they are troublemaking, dexterous, intelligent creatures that are so cute. But anyway, more cash, and I'll be honest, my husband and I are planning a trip to the Philippines with my mom soon, and that trip is pretty important to us. So weighing those choices, I would lean towards the trip, which has a specific one-time budget, whereas adopting a raccoon would be a long-term financial commitment. But it still makes me wonder, is it worth it? There are so many great things about a raccoon pet, and I even have a friend from high school band who has 2 raccoons. She seems to be having a very successful experience taking care of them and loving on them. One time she did struggle with stigma regarding a time a friend of hers reported that one of her raccoons scratched her. That was a several-day ordeal because they wanted to euthanize the raccoon so that they could test her for rabies. Well, thing is, she had a recent rabies vaccine, but everyone was convinced that she had rabies for some bizarre reason. And it seems like a really tough decision to consider, thinking, well, there's that stigma, there's that expense, and then just the undue stress of taking care of an animal that overall seems quite loving. So, why don't I check out some information on raccoon cafes? Maybe they will help me come to a better and more final decision. Or it could just cause me more confusion. Well, we'll find out.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So y'all, I am struggling. Should I adopt a raccoon or should I not? There's evidence for and against it, which means I'm at a complete standstill. I imagine that there are plenty of people just like the influencer Mitchell and Tito, and his raccoon Tito, who have captured what it's like to own one, but there's kind of a clear bias in how they frame their stories, and obviously we can't watch them in the wild because most of them are nocturnal, and they definitely don't behave like any domesticated animal, which I guess there's that to consider. I figured at this point I needed to see videos of them in action. This path led me down to cat cafes and then eventually raccoon cafes in South Korea. At first, a lot of videos just showed raccoons being cute because the majority of people who came to this particular cafe, blind cafe, were excited tourists. They just think it's so cool, and it's kind of true. But I remembered one video from a few years ago that really showed that raccoons were kind of the worst, and I couldn't find it. So I went on a very long search on YouTube for this video to no avail. However, I did find one that seemed to show raccoons in a more neutral way, which for the purpose of this podcast episode is actually kind of perfect. No cute music, no awing or guffawing over them, just raccoons running loose in a cafe. Take a moment to imagine that, actually. It was probably one of those proto-cafes that didn't really have very strict rules and didn't really expect these creatures to be as chaotic as they were. I believe this video was posted in YouTube 2015. It was by this duo, actually, they were a couple, called Two Hearts, One Soul. And Seoul is a play on the actual capital of South Korea, Seoul, which is pretty clever, I think. In this cafe, the raccoons were at first very inactive. Reminder, raccoons are for the most part nocturnal, and the customers, understandably, were not allowed to touch or pick them up while they were sleeping. As time went by, though, the raccoons started waking up. And once this happened, you could call this either chaos or mischievous cuteness. But the raccoons, which were 6 of them, started bothering the customers. Wait, no. It's better described as harassing the customers. The raccoons would grab and tip over drinks. They'd paw at the people and their cups, and they would just kind of drop the cups onto the ground. They'd climb on tables and chairs. They'd dig for ice in cups. They would dig through people's bags and pockets. Now, remember that animated raccoon I was telling you about earlier? Think that. And remember how he'd always give himself a 5-finger discount? And then he'd have a place where he would hoard all of his trinkets. This is exactly what these buggers were doing. Back to some other videos. Well, while some things were framed as very cute, I did not think so. For instance, there were raccoons in the blinds, bending them, tearing them down, and falling through them. I've even seen videos where the raccoon essentially broke through the drywall of a bedroom and then made it into his little burrow. And again, it was framed like, oh, so cute. But I'm going to be honest. I actually like where I live. I recently bought this place, and it is in fantastic condition. There's absolutely no way that I would find this acceptable. The only option, and as pet owners, this is the only option. These little guys must be trained. You train your dog to do all kinds of tricks, and you do what you can to train your cat how to use the litter box and other little tricks too. You are going to have to train these raccoons. And now that I mentioned cats, one way I would describe these raccoons in these videos is as a slightly less intelligent cat, but with hands. Face it, if cats had hands, they would have taken over the world by now. But that topic is for another day. Y'all can think on that until then. But back to the raccoons in the videos. For the particular cafe that Two Hearts, One Soul were at, these little guys were quite naughty, and they were apparently domesticated. They had been in captivity since they were born, basically. If I make no attempt or I do a terrible job at training a raccoon, my house will be pure chaos. And let me remind you that I have an 11-month-old puppy who likes to rip stuff up, to chew on things, to have little accidents, to bring strange things from outside, and then some. Why? Why in the world would I want an untrained raccoon in my house? And this all returns to one thing about raccoons that I really don't like. they are nearly impossible to house train. Now tell me, if they're difficult to house train, who can say that they're easy to train at all? I have never seen a convincing video of a raccoon doing tricks, honestly. And if you got the videos, I'd love to see them. Prove me wrong. It'll just add fuel to my burning desire to have a raccoon in my family. However, if you were to ask me right now if I still wanted a raccoon, no, I do not. But again, prove me wrong. My hands are quite full, though, and I'm sure that my husband would be completely unconvinced about adopting one. There's just too many pets in our house already, and that's what he would probably say regardless. We're probably not the best trainers to handle a raccoon, and sure, they're cute, but they're also a menace to your belongings. They will be touching everything. Everything. Keep that in mind. So I guess I'm not getting a raccoon, guys? But then, who exactly is qualified to adopt and train a raccoon? Or maybe they should just remain wild animals instead of people trying to domesticate them. The thing is, though, that I don't think anyone is going to stop adopting raccoons. In some places, it's illegal, but legality is not always considered by some people, and this brings me back to who can and who should be raccoon owners. I have a friend that is actually a great owner, but I just don't know. I think that I need to consider this. What are they like in the wild? Would I end up in an episode of Fatal Attraction? That was from like 2010, 2014. But that kind of ages me, I guess. And just to put things into perspective for what exactly Fatal Attraction was. So when Animal Planet was Animal Planet, there was a show called Fatal Attraction that was basically a reality show for people that took in animals as pets, but these pets were exotic animals and had laws against them actually being owned by regular people. So a lot of the animals were like hyenas and tigers and lions, and a lot of these had a lot of strange triggers. So for the tiger, which was in a top apartment, like the top level of an apartment in Harlem, this tiger got into a fight with this guy's domestic cat. Like, it completely freaked out, and the cat got away, which was great, oh, how happy for the cat. But the man was actually attacked, and because he was trying to defend the little cat. But there was also this guy that, for the hyena, was, I think, headbutted by a hyena that he was taking care of, and he had bought this hyena illegally too. And it's just such a bizarre thing that people will go about doing this kind of stuff. And sometimes I worry, based on my love for animals, could I possibly be a person that ends up being, illegally getting an animal, then taking care of it secretly, and isolating myself from family and friends so they don't know that I'm doing something quite dangerous, with my life. And then, ending up on a reality TV show where I am possibly kind of paraded around the world now as a complete fool for trying to tame a wild animal without any skills whatsoever. But anyway, maybe for this next segment, I'll be a little more informed about considering them as wild animals instead of just adorable little animals that need to be protected and fed.
Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
of what I've talked about are the things about raccoons in captivity. I haven't even considered them as wild animals, which, let's face it, at the very core of my thinking is that they are wild animals. Seriously, people still hunt and eat them. A lot of the time, they're basted and baked, according to some recipes. I don't know if I can prepare myself for the possibility of my raccoon escaping and then my neighbor saying, that little boy looks tasty, and then never seeing it again. I can only hope that someone with a soft spot for raccoons like Calvin Coolidge will come across him and take him in, possibly naming him Lester. That seems like an appropriate name, right? But let's just say that we were late in our attempts to domesticate him, and, well, he escapes. But Lester knows that we're friendly to raccoons, or we're at least friendly to him. So keep this in mind. Lester, though we have named him, is not domesticated yet. Therefore, he is a wild animal. What are raccoons known for in the wild? They are trash pandas. They get into your trash, knock over the bins, destroy your gardens. Oh, and I learned just recently this. Did you know that they can cause structural damage to your homes looking for things to eat? So basically, they're a nuisance, which makes me understand why there are a lot of people who don't like them. Sure, they're cute, and based on that myth that they wash their food, can you imagine them washing trash? Trash is still trash, no matter how many times you wash it. Unless it's gold, or jewelry, or money. I'd like that. Sure, on its face, it sounds like raccoons are a nuisance to society, but normally I don't really follow PETA because they can be a bit extreme. But they actually have some reasonable things to say about raccoons living in harmony with humans. First of all, PETA opens up with this article with the most baller kind of fact, and that is that raccoons apparently share a common ancestry with bears. How can you top that? Well, you can. In this article, they have a section labeled Solving Conflicts Compassionately. One thing that they mention is that raccoons are opportunistic eaters, so the best way to solve the problem of them destroying your garden is basically containing the potential food sources from them. And, well, if there's no available food, then they should just leave. So, like installing a lock on your trash cans, that could be a possibility. As far as I know, raccoons are not Houdini. They cannot unlock locks, and maybe if they have a key, they could figure things out, but let's try not to be reckless and hide a key under a fake rock or something. There is a potential that they're going to find it because, you know, they like touching things. Apparently motion detector lights and simply just radios left on at night are other ways that you can deter them. Oh, also, never feed wildlife. These words are in bold, and the word never is italicized. They also mention something strange. According to them, you may find raccoons and their babies in your attic and chimneys. They say that it is inhumane to remove them or separate them or starve them. Obviously, I agree. But we're supposed to leave raccoons in our home? Is there not a better solution? I mean, they strongly recommend not removing them ourselves because we could be potentially mauled and killed by them, you know, the bear stuff. But leaving them to nest for a few months in your home seems like it's a little too much to ask for, and also kind of health concerns there. I bet this is why some people try to domesticate them. They just find them chilling in their homes and think they're the coolest things ever. In the end, PETA is saying leave them alone. Deter them once it's humane to evict them, and seal up your home while still putting use to your deterrence. Seems to be reasonable, especially when PETA tells us that relocating raccoons can actually kill them, even if it's to the wild or wooded areas. And while I realize that there is a stigma about all raccoons having rabies, they are a major carrier of it. It's a reality that we have to accept. If you invite a wild animal into your home, you better know for a fact that the raccoon does not have rabies, or you're going to have a hard time. I'm the type of person that you could possibly call a pessimist, but I would say practical instead. And on top of that, my husband is so risk-averse that I could never see him accepting a wild animal like this into his home, especially with the risk of rabies. Sure, our pets are vaccinated, but we are not. So let's forget this Calvin Coolidge joke and the cool parts about having a raccoon as a pet. He would have immediately vetoed it. As in, my husband would have vetoed it. I'm lucky to have someone that balances me out when it comes to, impulsive decisions. If I didn't, I would probably have 10 cats, 40 dogs, 2 raccoons, a squirrel, and probably a strong chance of being in the early stages of rabies. I would also be very broke. And the ASPCA would be called on me, and all of my wonderful pets would be taken away from me. Because, at that point, it's an obsession, not love. Seriously, when in doubt, you gotta ask yourself, what would Bob Ross do?
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
We've talked about the good and the bad about adopting a raccoon. We've talked about raccoon cafes and gotten to know raccoons as more than pets. But if you're still a little confused about what you want to do, just ask yourself, and don't worry, I'm asking myself this too, what would Bob Ross do? As an FYI, Bob Ross was an artist who made paintings so accessible to people. He emphasized kindness and creativity. He also made it clear that mistakes are always a part of life. This is bizarre because before he became an artist, he was in the army. When he retired, he swore to never raise his voice again, and you can see that he committed to that in his own shows. He spoke softly and had a calm demeanor. One of the other things that made him very iconic, aside from his landscapes that he did in less than 30 minutes, was his cute perm. Yes, I called it cute. And he actually hated it when he first got it, but he rolled with the punches because his producers said that it made him so recognizable to people. And I remember his Chia Pet as a child, during those little commercials where they're, just selling you stuff. I remember that. It was very specific in my memory. And his show even helped pull me out of a serious period of depression for me. So he has had that kind of impact on almost anyone who has watched his show, The Joy of Painting. If you're familiar with his show, then you should be familiar with how he rescued animals, how he nursed them back to health and prepared them so that they could return to the wild. And then he would let them go when he thought that they were ready. So sometimes these animals had grown attached to him and they would linger around his home. And he was fine with that. It was their choice to remain close by. And they still disappeared once in a while to do wildlife things. But other times, those kiddos just kind of went and lived a happy little life and he never saw them again. And he has had a range of animals in his care during his career. Owls, raccoons, deers. Probably the best known animal he had on the show was Peapod the pocket squirrel, a little squirrel that he at times kept in his front shirt pocket. But probably the most bizarre animal he tried to rehabilitate in his childhood was an injured alligator. An alligator. Imagine his mom's surprise when she found an alligator in her bathtub, or even finding an armadillo under his bed. But the thing is, he always let his rehabilitized animals go. Even Peapod. Bob Ross knew that their place wasn't with humans or in any residential areas. They would be happier in the wild, where they came from. They lived a separate life from humanity, and he knew that, and that's okay. This is what he believed, at least. In the case of owning a raccoon, the case of knowing what needs to be done to care for one, and also me just loving Bob Ross and the messages he shared, this is probably the most compelling reason to not own one, even if they are cute. What is natural for them? What do they know? Sure, they can live comfortable lives in your own homes. You feed them, you water them, you pet them, bathe them, play with them, all kinds of things. Things that you would normally do with domesticated animals. But unless exotic animals are domesticated, they're unable to truly adapt to something that restrains them from exploring the world in a way that they're comfortable with. And we know that raccoons do like exploring things, touching things, and playing with them. Why keep them from doing what's natural to them? It's like telling me to not write our podcast, to be honest. It's not something that I can go about life not doing. It's not possible. So why would we ask wild animals like raccoons to live outside their comfort zones? We can always say that it's good to get out of our comfort zones, sure. That's how we grow and become better people. But they're comfort zones for a reason. It's something that you can return to when things get hard. It's if you had a friend and a good home or just a person that you could turn to, and this was maybe during a time of like serious need, like maybe you were in danger of getting homeless, or you were financially struggling, like you could go home or to these people and you would hopefully be able to find help. And you do this because that's where you're from. And, home does not just have to be a place. It could be a person. And, that's something to really consider. And I'm sorry that I'm getting way off track here from, raccoons and animals, but it's all pretty relevant. If you didn't have anyone, you would probably go to a clergy member, a teacher, other friends, any kind of mentor. And it can be anyone instead of a family member. These people become your comfort zone. They become home to you. And you find this place where you feel safe, and animals, especially wild animals, need that too. I'm not crucifying anyone with raccoon pets, or exotic pets for that matter. That would be unfair. I'm not an extremist, but with all of this in mind, and I mean me, I can't with a clear conscience adopt and raise any exotic pet, even raccoons. Even though I love them because of a dream I had in my childhood. I just love them, but I can't. It keeps going on in my mind that they have their place and we have ours. Sometimes there are things worth rocking the boat over. Sometimes there are things that aren't. I feel like in this situation, we, as in me and my husband, shouldn't be making any waves. But if you want an exotic pet, I'm not going to convince you of doing otherwise. That is your choice, and I have no right to tell you what to do. All I ask is that you do your research, make sure you make a climate for them that allows them to be happy and to thrive. Make sure you can adapt to their needs, because they're the ones that are probably out of their comfort zones. Then, who knows, maybe eventually they too can adapt to the changes in what is initially natural to them. Because let's face it, everything is born to adapt. Which brings me to the wonderful little cookie.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
So, raccoons, we've talked about them. We've talked about how even though I really want one, it's not a good idea. And raccoon cafes and just knowing them as wild animals is something that would really convince me not to do that. And again, Bob Ross is a guiding light for me. But when it comes to animals that need a comfort zone, well, we have Cookie. And Cookie is a rescue that we had. We got her in October of last year, if I remember correctly. And I saw her picture on a Facebook page of one of my friends that has a rescue. And my heart just kind of started aching for her. She looked sad. She looked like she wanted to, just run away. She looked like a dog that needed a home. And that was just something that really struck me. And we were actually in line to take care of another dog of my friend's rescue. But our puppy Reggie at the time, just was so, confrontational with this other dog. So it didn't work out, but believe it or not, it was the same day that Cookie was coming to town, and she was coming up from Kentucky, and she was covered in fleas and just a very quiet, sad dog. And I think I've mentioned before, Cookie is a toy poodle, and she's 13 years old. We hear more about her story from my friend, I'll call her Robin, and she tells us that this poor dog, her owners had passed away just very recently, and for the past 3 months, she was living in the backyard of the previous owner's daughter, and a daughter's house, and there was no flea protection. So at some point, she started getting dermatitis and flea biting scars. And sometimes she didn't have food, no water, and no electricity. And it was starting to get a little cold over there. And poodles can't really weather the cold very well. And I just kind of, my heart kept on breaking and breaking for this little girl. And I managed to convince my husband, actually Cookie managed to convince my husband to keep her, because she was quickly treated for her fleas when she arrived, and she just came out and she hopped into his arms and he just fell in love. She was so happy, and I don't want to get all teary-eyed, but Cookie was so scared, and she didn't want us touching in certain places. She still doesn't really like it, but we have given her a home. She had her Christmas, and Robin was like, well, we didn't even know if she would have Christmas for this year. So we have given this little dog a good home, a place to stay warm, a place to be fed. She will never have to worry about having fleas or getting dermatitis again. And she's just a happy little girl, and she is starting to get used to us, more comfortable with us with, grooming, because it's very important for poodles to be regular at grooming. But just night and day between her first grooming experience with us and her most recent one. Like, she now actually kind of looks like a dog. She kind of looks like, even more so, a toy poodle. But it took so much time and so much vulnerability to really get to the point that we could really take care of Cookie the way she needed to be taken care of. And this dog, while she, has been traumatized in the past, she is also a really big diva. She shrieks whenever she's displeased by something. She insists on sleeping on my pillow at night. And even if we don't want her in the bedroom, she will just squeeze on in there and hop onto the bed like she owns the place. It's pretty adorable. And I would say that probably the most fun about Cookie is dressing her up in these little sweaters, especially during the wintertime. She's not going to have to wear them anymore, which kind of sucks. I'll probably find some different clothes to put on her. But I intend on replacing her collar, because the collar that she is wearing right now is one that we were just given to by the rescue. And I wanted to give something to her that is very, cute, meaningful, and also pretty her. And the very funny thing is that this collar that I'm probably going to give her is the collar that we got Reggie in when she first came to us. And Reggie was a small little puppy when we first got her. So I think that this will probably be a good fit for Cookie. But I have to say that rescuing an older dog has been an experience that I never thought I would really enjoy. Just with the idea of you don't have much time with them, and, they might be sick, or, something that just is really sad. But I'm not saying Cookie has changed the way I think of the world, because Cookie is quite dumb. But she has made me really think about just the value in others' lives. And again, I'm not saying that I didn't value older people's lives, but I am feeling more patient with it, and I just kind of want to make sure that I can give Cookie a more comfortable life than she had, those few months when she was in Kentucky. And I don't know, I love that dog, and I really hope we have plenty of time to share with her before, she eventually passes. But for the time being, I have a lot of plans for Cookie. We are going to go to the dog park. We still need to sign up for one, but I am now officially going to be giving her a place in my purse, because today we went to the vet, and she just fit perfectly in one of my bags, and it just kind of, I don't know, a light bulb popped into my head, popped into my head. And I just love the idea of having this dog in a shoulder bag. And this dog weighs like 10.2 pounds. There's no reason for me to not do that for her. I mean, again, her bowl says princess. She's definitely not the queen of the house, or the king of the house, that is Eisen's spot, but she is definitely a princess, and she deserves to be treated like a princess. Or else, well, why did I give her that bowl in the first place, right? Anyway, Cookie has been a great addition to our family, and I'm so happy that we have her. And she definitely makes me really think of the future when it comes to maybe even getting a another senior dog, or senior cat for that matter, just to give them a nice chance to have a wonderful time in their golden years. But that's really all I gotta say about that. Cookie doesn't need that much stage time or, talking time. So I'm gonna let that go. But don't tell Cookie that or Eric that, because they're kind of attached at the hips. But you can definitely tell Eisen that, because, well, he just kind of loves whenever we make fun of Cookie. So again, a huge thing about Cookie is that she shows us that we can adapt. Even though it might take us a while, we can still make changes in our lives that, would maybe make things for the better. But again, Bob Ross would probably take in Cookie and just make her the happiest little dog. And we're going to try to make her the happiest little dog that we can. Fingers crossed. So, I am going to head out now. I have papers to grade and grades to finalize. Kind of sounds fun, right? No, not really. You don't have to lie to me. But I do hope that you guys have some great plans for tonight, and I will live vicariously through you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Pets Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would love to ask you guys to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review, because that really does help us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, that would be awesome. Thank you, and have a wonderful night.
You've been listening to the GSMC Pets Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.